Hello, fellow Novians. So today I want to talk about air brakes and how they work. There's something that I observed a long time ago, and I've done a lot of experimentation with it and playing with it, and come up with some cool little tips and tricks for flying that I've tried explaining to some people, but I haven't found it's gone super well. So I'm going to try and make a video to really explain the intricacies of a weird mechanic and how it works. I'm not even sure it's intentional. I think it might actually be technically a bug. Like, it's not really how air brakes should work. So, yeah, I don't know if they intended this to be in the game or not, but regardless, it's how they work, and sometimes it messes me up if I'm not paying attention to it. But now that I've figured out how it works, sometimes I can also use it to my advantage for some cool little maneuver things. So I pre-recorded some gameplay so that I can pause it and step back and show in some specific details how it works. So here, credit, this is the XVX Chainsaw by Serapis, is the ship that I'm flying for this little video. I picked it just because it's what I had on hand that's really fast and has good solid brakes. So it speeds up real quick, gets going real fast, and then can brake on a dime. So, alright, so here, basically this is how you sort of expect brakes to work. I've got the trajectory lines on. So you start moving, you slow down. When you slow down, you see the trajectory forward gets counteracted by trajectory backwards. Or sorry, gets actually counteracted by force forwards along with it. So you can actually see the little red arrows from the brakes pointing out forward in the direction that I'm going, because that's the direction of force that the brakes are applying. Pretty much what you expect. You're flying in a direction, you step on the brakes slow you down in the direction you're traveling. But here's where it gets kind of interesting. So I'm gaining some altitude here, flying up to a slightly higher speed. And now you see, I wanted to get going a little bit quicker so you can kind of see it. When I angle down and step on the brakes, you see there's actually a rather large upward force that happened there. So it's hard to see because it happens so fast. But if you look at my vertical speed, my vertical is at almost 0. I step on the brakes, and suddenly I'm going 65 kilometers an hour upwards. Now what happened there was I angled the ship down a little bit, and then I stepped on the brakes. And that's what happened. And if I recall correctly, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up to speed, I'm going to angle the ship up a little bit, and step on the brakes. And we're going to see a similar behavior, but the other way around. So you see on Sagas here, my vertical speed, it shows there is 60 kilometers an hour. So I'm currently going 60 kilometers an hour upwards. That's the vertical component of my speed. Oh no, okay, I went up again. So again, you see I angled down, got it down to around 0, and then when I stepped on the brakes again, it suddenly went up. Alright, so spin around, and go for another run. So again, get going pretty quick. I turned on the altitude hold to keep it relatively stable. Get up over, I think I got over 1,700 kilometers an hour on this one. Okay, so now cruising around 1,650, turn off the altitude hold, pull up, step on the brakes, and suddenly my vertical speed just slams downwards. I'm going 100 kilometers an hour downwards. Almost instantly. Even though I was flying almost perfectly straight. I pull up, and I hit the brakes, and suddenly I get slammed downwards. So what seems to happen is, basically, you've got the red line here of your actual current trajectory. If you angle your ship slightly above that, so that your forward vector is above the forward trajectory, like your trajectory vector, you actually push downwards when you brake, as well as pushing back on the direction that you're going. And it's not a small force, it's pretty big. And if you're going the other way around, so if you angle downwards, so that your forward vector, or your trajectory vector is forwards, and you're angled down, then it applies an upward force. And like it's substantial. So you see here, I'm getting going pretty quick. I'm leveling out my vertical speed to be almost even. I pull up, I slam on the brakes, boom, 250 kilometers an hour downwards. Just like that. There's really no reason that brakes should work this way, but an interesting side effect of that is that because it actually applies that downward force that's downwards according to your ship, not according to gravity, you can do things like what I'm doing right here, which is I'm literally turning and twisting the ship, and then as you're falling, you step on the brakes, and it actually applies a force towards the downward vector on your ship. So you can actually do some interesting like navigation when you're coming into land by literally just tilting one way, and then stepping on the brakes, and then it pushes you off at a directory that way. So you can basically like flutter down like a leaf on the wind, which is pretty cool. Now, where it gets really tricky is in situations like this one here, where if you're actually pretty close to the ground, see what happened there? I was getting close to the ground, so I decided to stop. Okay, so I'm cruising along, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting close to the ground. I need to stop. Your instinct is to pull up, and your instinct is to hit on the brakes. But if you pull up and hit the brakes, then your forward vector goes up, so your trajectory vector is pointing underneath your forward vector. You step on the brakes, it puts a huge downward force on you and slams you into the ground. Whereas now here, you'll see what I'm doing is, again, getting up to speed, cruising along really close to the ground, going really fast, and then I pull down a little bit, so I literally point my ship towards the ground and step on the brakes, and it pops me up like 150 kilometers an hour. Watch this again. Okay, cruising along. My vertical speed is 150 down. Okay, I could settle it at 0, angle down, boom, and then up. Sorry, 170 kilometers an hour I hit, going upwards. Pulls you way away from the ground by pointing towards the ground before you step on the brakes. So it's a weird little mechanic, but like your instinct, if you're coming into the ground at an angle, is to pull up and hit the brakes. But if you pull up and hit the brakes, your brakes are actually working against you in that case. They're actually going to be pushing you towards the ground. So you see here again, got going really fast, pointing towards the ground, and then the last minute emergency escape is actually to point towards the ground and then step on the brakes. And you see that trajectory line just pop way up. Suddenly it pulls me way away from the ground, right? And then here I think is where I decided to show off how you can actually maneuver the ship as you're flying in. So it's something that I found honestly with the ship when I was doing mining calibrations. I would take the ship around to go to the different spots. So I'd like park in one location with the big ship and then take this guy around to do some mining calibrations and pick up ore from the little outposts around the main flower cluster. And I'd be flying in, and this ship gets up to speed really fast, so it's nice. You're only going 2 tiles over, but I get up to speed really fast, and then I would like pull down to try and come in and land next to the thing. And because I pulled down and I step on the brakes, suddenly the ship goes whoomp, and then I've got to wait like 30 seconds for it to slow down, come in, and land again, because angling down popped the brakes. Whereas here, if you angle up and hit the brakes, it actually forces you downwards and lets you come in for a landing really fast. Dangerous, because coming in for a landing really fast is always inherently dangerous. But yeah, that's basically my little quirk about how brakes don't actually just slow you down. They actually do apply forces in other vectors. I've noticed this with sagas, I've noticed it with arches, I've noticed it with the default HUD. I don't think it's something that's HUD specific. I haven't done any experimentation with the Lua myself to try and see if I can force the brakes to force me in other directions. If someone else wants to play around with that, it might work. I'm not sure. But it seems like the default behavior across the board causes this weird push up and down effect. So again, just to recap, basically, based on the vector of your trajectory, if the forward vector of your ship is above that, then it actually applies a force not just counteracting your trajectory, but also downwards in line with your ship, like your ship down. And if you are angled slightly below your trajectory vector, then it applies a force on the upward trajectory of your ship. So if you're coming in for a landing and you're finding that you're a little bit off to the left of where you want to be, if you're to the left of where you want to be moving to the right, you can actually angle your ship left so that the bottom of your ship is pointing towards where you want to go and step on the brakes, and it will actually push you in that direction as you're slowing down. So it can be very handy for those precise landings. Alright, this is my quick little video on the quirkiness of dual universe brakes. Hope it helps someone land better and hopes it helps someone not crash. Have a good one.